Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Idaho House Republicans podcast, where you get to learn a little bit more about those that you have sent to the State House. And today we are very privileged to have Representative Lucas Cayler, and Lucas represents Legislative District 11. He sits in the B seat, and he is a first-termer, a freshman. And welcome to the Idaho House Republicans podcast, Lucas Cayler.
Hey, thank you, Victor. I appreciate the invitation to come on your podcast.
We can't wait to get to know you a little bit better. Let me tell you a little bit about Lucas Cayler before we get into questions. He served in the U.S. Navy. He started in 1999. He did 10 years of active duty, and then he did 3 years with the Department of Defense contractor. He's an electronics and radar systems specialist, and he did two. He was honorarily discharged in 2009. He did a couple of deployments, Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. Incredible. And he is a big rig service technician, a sales associate, purchasing agent, everything to fix the big things in our life that need fixing so that we can keep our economy going and keep our country safe, right?
Absolutely.
So thank you for joining us. Representative Cayler, the first question we always ask people is, tell us a little bit about Legislative District 11. So first of all, where is it? And then what do your constituents care about? Like, why did they send you to the State House?
Great question, Victor. So Legislative District 11 is within, almost all of it is within the city limits of Caldwell.
Okay.
So it's a geographically very small, which makes it nice because I can walk and knock almost every single door in district. And that's obviously been such a blessing. But there is a pretty dense population within that district for me.
Right.
And the issues that they care about, overwhelmingly, when I was on the campaign trail in 2024, property tax is such a huge one. I mean, as you know, I think Caldwell is the fourth largest city in Idaho, and granted, we have gotten a little bit of property tax relief because of the massive growth that's helping to offset the cost for people. But, talking to people that, elderly typically who have been in Caldwell for many, many years, 2 or 3 decades, they've described how a lot of them are having difficulties keeping up with the assessed value of their property now, which greatly exceeds what their original mortgage was. And in a lot of cases, some people have had to sell. So that's a really big issue. I think probably one of the second biggest issues is just the tax burden and the cost of inflation, the cost of everything, right? Gas, groceries, the cost of mortgage and rent, and then which I can definitely identify with. But then third is the dissatisfaction with the public education system, and Caldwell seems to definitely kind of hit that for a lot of people.
And the one nice thing about that district for you is that it's fairly consistent, right? Because we've talked to a number of representatives who have a city part of their district and a rural part of their district, and it creates challenges on creating a consistent policy that represents the entire constituency. In your case, you're kind of blessed that you have a self-contained. So tell us a little about Caldwell, the city of Caldwell, and is it a big city, a small city? Tell us about what the city's like.
Well, so Caldwell used to be small town. I mean, back when I first left home back in the late 90s, Caldwell was, sub 25,000 people. And I want to say somewhere 2005 or so, it finally hit 25,000. I thought, man, Caldwell's really growing. Well, now we're up to 70,000+ people within the city. And of course, not all of that's in my legislative district. We've got about 55,000 in district itself. But it's mostly residential, but the commercial and the industrial part is really starting to grow there.
Yes.
There's a lot of headway that's been made to expand infrastructure along Highway 2026 heading out of Caldwell on the highway headed towards Boise. There's a lot of retail development that's gone in there. There's a new St. Al's. There's a Home Depot. There's a brand new D&B supply. So a lot of growth coming in, which is good. That's, retail sales is also going to kind of help offset some of the revenue
property taxes too,
requirements coming from the city itself. But yeah, up until recently, Caldwell has really been just kind of a a residential area.
Let's talk a little bit about your first termer, freshman. Welcome to the State House. Well, what inspired you to run for the State House, Representative Cayler?
Thank you. Excellent question. So I'm a very liberty-minded person, and what inspired me to run initially was everything that happened during COVID-19. Obviously, a very decisive topic, um, but I personally was very unhappy with what I saw at the local government level as well as the national level with regard to the response to the pandemic. Um, as as we recall, the governor kept the state of Idaho under emergency for almost 2.5 years, which violated statutory authority, right? And it just, I was looking at what my district legislators were doing at the time, and I really wasn't happy with their performance and some of the issues that were very, of course, controversial around the COVID-19 situation. And so I just decided that if I don't step up and run, and I had the ability to, I can't really complain when things go south, and I
Right. If you're
could have
not
done
part of the if you're
something.
not part of the answer, then you're part of the problem.
Exactly.
Right. Well, Senator Ben Adams did the Stop Act, and I think there's been a lot of pushback against that type of closing of all of society. Idaho did get on board and did do some aggressive things in terms of stopping that in the future. Were you happy about some of the inroads that the legislature made and kind of making a statement about that?
Absolutely. I think some of it, unfortunately, came somewhat, a couple legislative sessions after the fact, but I would argue that better late than never is definitely a
Right.
good thing, especially with, government response to situations or national emergencies and such like that. There should never be a time and place in history where the government is able to remove the rights of people and violate their oath and violate the Constitution. And I think a really big one that I was happy to vote for and really pushed to get out of the House was Senate Bill 1210, which was the Medical Freedom Act that was passed in session of 2025. That really is a
And
game
became law.
changer.
Yep.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is a big
Tell
game
people
changer
about
bill.
that a little bit. If people may not be familiar with that bill and what it effectively did, because that is a good bill.
Right. So Senate Bill 1210, also known as the Medical Freedom Act, uh, basically states that the government does not have the right to insert their authority when it comes to medical decisions for the individual, which could violate one's bodily autonomy. It's language in the bill states that getting and requiring a medical intervention. Going to put a slightly finer point on that. I think this is definitely geared towards the receiving of a COVID-19 vaccine was kind of the larger intent behind that
Yes.
language of medical intervention,
Hmm.
but that an employer could not mandate a medical intervention as a term of employment.
Exactly.
And then, of course, the government at the same time cannot mandate such things against the population writ large.
Well, if you think about it, Idaho was one of the lowest take-up rates in terms of COVID shots anyway. So if you talk about proportionality relative to other states, this Medical Freedom Act was more important to more people proportionally in our state. So yes, the Stop Act, the Medical Freedom Act, very important pieces of legislation. Thanks for supporting that one. Let's talk a little bit about your background because it is unique in the State House. You have done 2 tours of duty. You were in the Navy for 10 years. You were Department of Defense contracted for 3 years. Just tell people about how that informs what you're trying to do at the State House, if at all.
Great. Another great question. Thank you. So I have a heart to serve. I get a personal satisfaction being able to serve my fellow man. And initially, as a child, I was raised in a very pro-military family. I had grandfathers on both sides that served. One during World War II, and another during the Korean War. And I was just it always was really impressed upon me watching the old World War II
That's very
documentaries in
personal
black
for
and
you.
white.
Yeah.
Yes. And I always wanted to be one of those guys. I wanted to be able to fight for my country and defend our rights and stand up against tyranny around the world too, which the US has had a big hand in, of course. Um, so a couple of things. The tours that I made, I've seen life in other countries. I understand that we in America have such a beautiful thing called the US Constitution, which enshrines the rights given to us by God. We, of course, our country is not perfect, but we have I would argue, the best and most beautiful opportunities that has ever been known to man in the history of humanity. And we live in a thriving and productive country. And I'm blessed to be there, and I'm blessed to have been put in a position to defend and fight for those freedoms to keep the flame of liberty alive. And this run for legislative office really was just kind of a natural outgrowth of that for me, but more at a local level, right? And I guess I kind of come by it honestly. My father ran against a I believe she was a Democrat incumbent back in 1988 when we lived in Nampa, and he came very close to primarying her. Not quite, though. I think he lost by 25 or 30 votes. But as a small child, I was 7 years old at the time. I was out there with my dad. We were knocking
Wow.
doors. We were putting up signs in people's yards. And I was, just as a little guy helping him with his campaign. And it always left a very lasting impression with me. My dad, just like I am, was a blue collar trades guy. And I always thought, if my dad could do it, why couldn't I? And well, here I am.
Well, you can almost look at this as a tour of duty, right? It's
Mhm.
you're serving again, but now you're doing these tours of duties are 2-year slots, and you want to try to do as much as you can to preserve the freedoms that you fought for abroad. You want to continue to fight for them right here and make sure that we maintain them, right?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about a couple of bills. And the first one is you wanted to chat about was a House Joint Memorial number 11 about the Fund for Individuals with Disabilities Act. Why is that one thing that you felt like was important to discuss today?
Well, because it definitely highlights an inconsistency of, I guess, the general legislative mind down here at the State House, and let me expound upon that. So prior to that, we had just, I think the week before, we had voted to pass, or we'd voted on, I personally didn't vote for it, but the concurrent resolution um, to do the balanced budget amendment,
Okay.
right, where it did pass the House. And with that resolution, that's urging Congress to take up a balanced budget, and let's start working on our massive federal debt, right? So I would say the majority of the body agreed that that is an issue. And while I did not vote in support of a convention of states resolution, um, I don't disagree with the Article 5 idea, right? And that's a whole separate topic. The mechanism of the Article 5 and
Okay.
the possibility of runaway convention, which is why I voted against it. Um, but specifically with House Joint Memorial 11, what this memorial was doing was calling upon Congress to ask them to fund up to the full 40% of the individuals. The IDEA Act, and I can't remember
Right, with the
the
Individuals Disability Act.
yeah,
Yeah.
Education Act.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you. And so I went and looked up the bill, and it said that Congress may fund up to a maximum of 40%, but there's some big funding formulas in there based upon the year and the age of the people and the state. Um, Idaho is currently funded at 12%. So my question and my debate against this was, why as a body are we going to pass a resolution that says Congress needs to act and balance our budget because our national debt is absolutely out of control and we're approaching a fiscal cliff and a point of no return? But yet we're going to call upon Congress to start taking more federal money to fund a a thing here locally. Yes, it's mandated by the federal government, but they're under no obligation to fund up to that 40%. But how many more millions of dollars, if they did decide to fund up to the 40%, would this be placing upon our taxpayers and just increasing the amount of federal debt that we owe? So it was very interesting that the inconsistency of the mentality of the legislative body down here. I found that uniquely fascinating.
Let's thank you for your comments on that. House Bill 557 is a bill that's being brought by Bruce Gog.
Yes.
It's a local anti-discrimination ordinance which prevents local governments and council and cities for enacting an ordinances imposing some anti-discrimination beyond what's required in state law.
Right.
Talk about why you are particularly interested in the outcome of this piece of legislation.
Great question. Thank you for asking. So there's a few cities in Idaho who have established these anti-discrimination ordinances or codes, and statutorily, a city can enact an ordinance or a code that exceeds or goes more strict, building upon a state law. Right? They can't go more relaxed, but they can make it more strict. And I, I guess a couple issues that were brought to light, and of course, the one that everybody I think remembers is the hitching post situation up in North Idaho some years back.
It's a wedding facility,
venue. Right?
That almost had to close down.
Exactly.
Because they did not want to do a wedding that was against their religious conscience.
Right.
Yes.
And then, of course, everybody remembers the ongoing battle with the cake maker in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
That went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And what these anti-discrimination ordinances do is it's making a special carve out for one group of people while infringing upon the constitutional rights and the right of conscience of a small business owner. And I'm sorry, a law either needs to be applied equally into all, or that law shouldn't be there. And anything that violates a constitutional right is, in my opinion, just morally and fundamentally wrong. And so I'm very much in support of this House bill. I think it sets constitutionally, we have the authority as the legislature to make sure that the rights of all Idaho citizens are upheld. And
Idaho already prohibits discrimination in housing and employment and education on basis of sex and sexual orientation and gender and religion. So the question is, why did this is duplicative? It's unnecessary. That's really the crux of the argument. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now let's talk about another. You did what's called an RS, which is a routing slip, which is the very beginning of how a bill starts. You get a routing slip. You go to committee. If it gets through committee, you get a bill number. It goes through debate in the committee. If it goes out of the committee, it goes to the floor of the House, then hopefully to the committee in the Senate, through the committee in the Senate, through the Senate to the governor. That's how it works. So you're at the very beginning, at the RS stage of a medical neglect bill.
Yes.
And you actually introduced that recently. Tell us what you're trying to do and what the prospects are of that RS.
Okay, thank you. So RS 33042 was my medical neglect bill, and that is one of 5 pieces of legislation that I am sponsoring that will make some appropriate CPS reform, Child Protective Services reform. And the main bill, which I'm struggling to get it introduced into committee, I'm getting a lot of pushback from the Department of Health and Welfare on, a lot of pushback. And that pushback is also being transferred down to the chairman of the committee. So I'm currently working.
And that's related to the medical neglect bill?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the medical kidnap bill, we're working right now with the agency directors to try to come to a kind of a good middle ground on it. And but specifically to the medical neglect bill, what this bill does is it would require a person, whether it's a mandatory reporter or just a bystander, to make sure that if they see an instance of child abuse or neglect, that the report that they're giving to Child Protective Services or to a law enforcement officer is accurate and correct. And then when the agency or law enforcement follows up on that claim, that there is substantiated grounds of actual medical neglect. And just one story I would like to highlight because, and there's many, but I'll make it two. Baby Cyrus, everybody remembers Baby Cyrus, 2022. His mother and father, Levi and Marissa Anderson, they had their child who was about 10 months old at the time. He was having a very difficult time weaning from breast milk, going to solid food. He kept throwing up. The parents took him to multiple specialists, really couldn't find anything wrong. It was noted by St. Luke's staff that the child was he was a bit underweight, and so the morning that he was supposed to be taken in for a follow-up weight check, the mother was ill. She called into the clinic and she said, "I'm not feeling good. I need to reschedule." She left a voicemail to do that, apparently, and allegedly, St. Luke's never called her back to reschedule that appointment. What they did was they called CPS and they filed a report of medical neglect, which is ultimately what ended up to the unfortunate removal of baby Cyrus from his parents. That's one situation. The other one that I'll touch on real quick, which is a current situation. I'm not going to name names out of respect for the family, but a young girl has a knot on her spine, apparently at the base of her spine, which impedes movement, walking, and so forth. And the mother has been diligent in getting her health care and has been working with a specialist to, address and to work with the issues that her daughter is having. And the specialist said that there is a surgery that he could do, but didn't recommend it at the particular time. And this was this past year in 2025. And he said that there was a limited benefit of the surgery, as there was a 50-50 chance that she might not walk again.
Okay.
And he said, "I don't recommend doing the surgery just yet. Let's wait." Well, at some point during the events, St. Luke's got involved in the case, and they said, "Oh no, she absolutely needs to have surgery right now." And allegedly, they made the call to CPS, and they had the daughter removed from the mother's care under an imminent harm and danger order. And what's really crazy about this is that if this really was an imminent harm and danger issue, the surgery apparently did not happen for another 5.5 months. So there was a specialist that they were working with that said, "There's a surgery available, but we don't recommend it at this time." So it's not like the mother was neglecting her daughter's care, but she was still charged with
Wow.
medical neglect. And that's just one of many issues that has come to light with the organization that I have been partnering with in Caldwell. And it's a problem. And obviously, at the end of the day, we're not trying to stop or impede Child Protective Services from investigating actual instances of abuse or neglect. There are children that absolutely need to have the state intervene and to make sure that they're safe and taken away from whatever abusive or dangerous situation that they're living in at home. But for the cases that we have been working with that have come to light, over the past couple of years, there are absolutely, there is an issue with parents being falsely charged for medical neglect, and then they're forced to go through the lawfare of the system. They
Right.
have to prove their innocence. They have to spend tens of thousands of dollars on attorney fees trying to
Mhm.
clear their name, working through the criminal charges that oftentimes are levied against them. And, it can be absolutely destructive to their finances, to their livelihood, to their home. And then, of course, I don't think there's any disagreement that a child that's removed from their family and from their parents is
It's traumatic.
it is very
Yeah.
traumatic, and it's going to forever alter the direction of their life. And so that's what these bills are
So,
hopefully going to be tightening up.
so Representative Cayler, tell us the RS. You brought it to committee. And one thing that we've learned as we've done more and more of these interviews is sometimes legislation takes a while to get from A to B.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's because there's something needs to be fixed. Sometimes the bill is ahead of its time. Sometimes the timing's just wrong, right? So in your case, I think it went to committee. It failed in committee. but you are you going to try to bring it back and tell us about that?
Yeah, so the after a long introductory hearing, a lot of questions from the committee members, um, it went to a vote and it failed on a tie vote. I did speak with several of the committee members who, overall, I think supported the intent behind the bill.
Right.
They just didn't like the fact that we had a private cause of action written into it. So we've amended and removed that private cause of action part from the bill, and I plan to reintroduce hopefully next week.
Well, continue to watch that, and it'll be obviously be given a different RS number. But let's talk about if we could stay on the topic. There was a in 2025. You were not part of this committee, but I'd love to get your take on it because I think obviously it's part of your passion here at the State House. There was a joint committee on the Child Custody and Domestic Relations Task Force. It had 5 people from the House, 5 people from the Senate. The House members were Representative Heather Scott, and we discussed this with her, Representative Barbara Ehart, Representative Marco Erickson, Representative Alfieri, Representative Gannon. And there was a 136-page white paper that came out of that showed, and then by the way, they interviewed judges and attorneys and agency folks and social workers and people,
Mhm.
that were suffering. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are of that paper and that effort that happened last year after the session. It was during the summer and into the latter part of December. Talk about that.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of heartbreaking stories that came from that. There was a lot of personal testimony from parents, and and I think it's really good to kind of touch on something that you mentioned a moment ago about the bills. Sometimes it takes a while to get them introduced, and it takes sometimes years to get a bill actually signed into law.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with this particular committee that you just referenced, that the the winds are favorably blowing in our direction. I think that there is a growing awareness of the fact that sometimes government is out of place when it comes to how the courts and child protective services react to or respond to certain situations, how judges rule on certain cases, and I think people are starting to get a little maybe concerned, and maybe they're ready for some action and they're ready for some reforms. Um, I think at the end of the day, we should be here to protect the rights of parents and also protect the safety of kids, and we have to find a middle ground where both of those happen, where we're not where the government isn't overstepping the rights of parents, but we're also keeping the children that need to be safe and an remove them from the home if they're in an unsafe situation and make sure that those kids are protected.
And just to remind everyone, so Representative Heather Scott was the co-chair. She represented the House. Senator Tammy Nichols represented the Senate. And the major conclusions of this 136-page white paper: 1, due process protections are routinely bypassed. 2, judicial oversight mechanisms lack transparency and accountability. 3, the administration agencies and court-appointed professionals operate without uniform standards. And 4, the economic disparities determine outcomes more than the evidence does. So we'll have to watch if there's any legislation that comes from this 136-page white paper from the Child Custody and Domestic Relations Task Force. But obviously you are running legislature. You weren't part of the committee, but you see some of the same things. That's why you're running some of these bills, and we appreciate that. The last thing I just want to chat with before we break is you're running a hobby farm bill. What is that? Tell us what is a hobby farm, and what are you trying to do? What's the bill?
Uh, it's pretty simple. As we know, there's a lot of neighborhoods that are under HOAs, right? And those HOAs have very restrictive covenants and agreements that prevent people from gardening or having like a small
Chickens,
personal
rabbits,
chickens.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And so I'm running a bill that's just it's making a definition for a hobby farm, and very similar to that, like a cottage farm. So cottage farm being more of like a um, you grow produce and you sell it, you have baked goods, you sell those, and this is kind of stuff that you you're raising there on your farm or growing. And so we're just making a small law change to allow people to do that within the confines of their neighborhoods that exist under HOAs. And, this is one of those deregulation, give the rights back to the people and allow people to live and to do the things that they want to do absent government or private entity overreach.
And there was a bill, for example, this is not the first of its kind, because there was an HOA bill that came through that said if someone wants to put up a solar panel on their home, some HOAs are saying, no, they're unsightly, they don't really fit the neighborhood. But then the legislature said, well, if you want to put a solar panel on your home and that's how you want to get the electricity to your home, you have the right to do so. So you can override the rights of the HOAs to impose certain things over its residents. You can. And so this is one thing that you'd like to see.
Absolutely.
Well, Representative Lucas Cayler, we've really enjoyed the time. To remind people, he is Representative Lucas Cayler. He represents Legislative District 11, and he's in Seat B. He's a freshman first-termer, and he's got a lot of ideas. This is his tour of duty. He's done it for the United States, having served in the Navy. Now this is his tour of duty at the State House, and we just bless the work of your hands on this adventure. We thank you for joining us at the Idaho House Republicans podcast. And as we always say before we sign off, God bless the great state of Idaho. And we thank you, Representative Lucas Cayler.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me on your show.
Sunrise on the Snake River plain, red, white, and blue in the window pane. Work boots dusty from yesterday, but we're back at it the Idaho way.